Last year, a 34-year-old graphic designer from Chicago sold her apartment, quit her job, and moved to 12 acres of raw land in rural Vermont. She documented the whole thing. The channel now has 800,000 subscribers. What those videos don't show is the winter she ran out of propane and slept in her car for 3 nights. Or the $40,000 she spent in year 1 before she grew a single vegetable. Or the part where she quietly picked up a remote part-time job because the savings were going faster than she planned. Going off the grid sounds like freedom. It mostly feels like a construction project that never quite ends. And today, we're going to find out exactly what that looks like, from the first week to year 3, from the water system to the mental health cost, including every part the YouTube algorithm has decided you don't need to see. The off-grid fantasy has a very specific aesthetic. There's a wood stove, a rain barrel, raised garden beds with things actually growing in them, and somebody is always making bread. It is suspiciously tidy. It is also one of the most watched corners of the internet. Homesteading channels routinely pull millions of views per video. The comments are full of people saying, "I want this so badly, and I'm doing this in 5 years." After 2020, searches for off-grid living roughly doubled, which makes sense given what 2020 was like. The cost of housing, the pace of city life, the general sense that something about modern life is poorly calibrated. All of it is driving real people toward a real idea. But here is where the fantasy and the reality start to peel apart. The YouTube version of off-grid life is, almost without exception, someone's highlight reel from year 3. What you are not seeing is year 1. And year 1 is a different story entirely. Before we get into the mechanics, it is worth knowing who is actually making this work. Because the assumption tends to be young idealists in their 20s with high follower counts. And that is not quite the full picture. Conservative estimates put the number of off-grid households in the United States somewhere between 180,000 and 250,000. The composition is interesting. A large portion are retirees who had decades to save and research. Another group are people with rural roots who already knew how to do most of this. A growing slice are remote workers who realize that if they are going to stare at a laptop all day, they can do it on 5 acres in New Mexico. Oh, and then there is the group that gets the most online attention, the people who decided to quit everything and figure it out as they went. That group has the highest failure rate. Anecdotal evidence from off-grid communities and homesteading forums consistently shows that a large portion of people who attempt a full transition return to conventional living within 2 years, and not because they quit mentally. The gap between "I want this" and "I can actually sustain this" is simply wider than anyone warned them. Which brings us to what that gap looks like in practice. Let's say you have bought your land. Congratulations. You are now the owner of a problem you have not yet fully understood. Day 1, you arrive. The land is beautiful. It also has no electricity, no running water, no heat, no waste system, and possibly no reliable road in. These facts do not cancel out the beauty. They simply add context. The first thing that surprises people almost universally is the time. Before your water system is in, you are hauling water, and not as a figure of speech. You are physically carrying containers from wherever you can source them. The average American uses somewhere around 80 gallons per day for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and toilet use. You will not be averaging 80 gallons a day. You will be doing water math for the first time in your adult life, and it will be humbling. Before your power system is in, light means lanterns and headlamps, and whatever charge is left on your phone. Before your food system is producing anything, and it will not be producing anything for a while, you are driving 45 minutes to a grocery store like everyone else, just less conveniently, and with more mud on your boots. But here is the part that catches people off guard more than anything else. City life runs on purchase time. You pay for food that is already cooked. You pay for things to be delivered. You pay for other people to fix things. Off-grid life runs on your actual time, and your actual time, it turns out, is finite and exhausting in ways that are hard to anticipate until you are in it. The first month, most people are so consumed with basic setup that none of the romantic parts happen at all. Not the long evenings on the porch, not the bread. Just building systems so you can function. And the systems are where the real complexity lives. Let's go through all 5. The most visible part of any off-grid setup is the power system. It is also where the first-year budget gets comprehensively destroyed. A basic solar array, sized to run lights, a small refrigerator, a laptop, and a water pump, runs between $10,000 and $25,000 installed. That is before you add battery storage for cloudy days, before you account for a backup generator for when the batteries are not enough, and before you discover that the angle of your roof or the trees to the south mean your panels are underperforming by 30%. Solar is the most popular option, but it has real constraints. Extended cloud cover in northern states can drain a battery bank in days. Wind turbines are expensive and require consistent, suitable wind conditions. Micro hydropower, if you have a year-round stream with sufficient flow, is actually excellent, but relatively rare. Propane generators are cheap up front and quietly expensive over time. Most off-grid setups end up as hybrid systems. Solar is the primary. A generator fills the gaps, and you develop a very close relationship with your power monitoring dashboard. You stop thinking of electricity as something that simply exists. You start thinking of it as something you produce, store, and budget. But the power system is only the first of the 5. The second is the one that almost never appears in anyone's off-grid budget. Water is the most critical system on any off-grid property. It also gets the least screen time in the YouTube version, because watching someone run water quality tests is not compelling content. Your main options are a private well, collected rainwater, or an on-property spring or stream. Drilling a well costs between $15 and $30 per foot, and you will not know how deep you need to go until you are already drilling. The national average depth runs around 150 to 200 feet. That works out to $3,000 to $6,000 at minimum, before the pump, the pressure tank, the filtration system, and the plumbing to your structure. Rainwater collection sounds free until you find out it requires permits in several states, and that storing enough for year-round use means thousands of gallons of tank capacity. Springs and streams require regular testing, often treatment, and do not always run consistently through dry summers. None of this makes water impossible. People have been sourcing it off-grid for a very long time. It just requires planning and infrastructure before a single drop comes out of a tap. But even with power and water sorted, you are still driving to the grocery store. And that brings us to food, which is where the timeline surprises people most. Here is the honest version of growing your own food. It is a long game. A much longer game than the content suggests. In your first year, you are mostly building soil, learning where the sun actually hits your land at what times, discovering which crops do not survive your specific climate, and buying vegetables from the same stores you always used. Meaningfully offsetting your grocery bill through food production typically takes 2 to 4 years of consistent effort. To fully feed one person for a year from a garden takes roughly half an acre to 1 full acre of productive land, depending on your diet, your soil, and your climate. Productive is carrying a lot of weight in that sentence. Chickens, for the record, are one of the more manageable starting points for off-grid food systems. Eggs are reliable, the math is simple, and the learning curve is short. Chickens are also loud, destructive when left unsupervised, occasionally ill, and statistically very likely to be eaten by a predator in year 1 unless your fencing is excellent. That is not a warning. That is just what happens. And when you are done eating, there is still one system that nobody makes a YouTube channel about. Off municipal sewer, your options are a septic system, which runs $5,000 to $15,000 installed and requires suitable soil percolation. A composting toilet, which runs $1,000 to $5,000 and requires regular maintenance that is exactly as hands-on as it sounds. Or a properly permitted outhouse, which is legal in some jurisdictions and uncomfortable in February in ways that are difficult to describe to someone who has not experienced it. Gray water, meaning water from sinks, showers, and laundry, also needs a managed system. Most jurisdictions require permitted gray water disposal even on private land. This is simply an entire category of infrastructure that city life made invisible, and now you are responsible for building it from scratch. The last of the 5 systems is the one with no margin for error. Heat is a life safety issue. Getting it wrong in a northern winter is an emergency, and the correction window is 0. Wood heat is the most reliable off-grid solution. A properly installed wood stove can heat a small, well-insulated structure efficiently and runs on a fuel source you can produce locally. It also requires cutting, splitting, stacking, and drying several cords of wood before winter arrives. For reference, 1 cord of wood is a stack 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, and 8 feet long. A well-insulated small home typically burns 2 to 4 cords in a full winter, which means sourcing wood in spring is not optional. Propane is easier to manage, but ties you permanently to a delivery schedule and a bill that will surprise you every February. The most reliable setups use wood as primary heat with propane or electric backup. Not romantic, but it works. The off-grid fantasy often involves escaping money, or at least escaping the relentlessness of it. The reality is that going off the grid costs more up front than staying on the grid by a wide margin. When you add up land, basic shelter, a water system, a power system, a waste system, tools, initial food storage, and the emergencies that arrive in year 1. Whether you invited them or not, the total usually lands somewhere between $50,000 and well over $100,000. The $15,000 off-grid cabin build videos are almost always calculated with free or heavily discounted labor, donated materials, and systems excluded from the tally. The people who navigate year 1 without financial crisis tend to share one profile. They spent 2 or 3 years before the move saving aggressively, researching obsessively, and doing real trial runs. Weekends first, then full weeks living without grid power, hauling water, practicing what they were planning. The people who show up with $20,000 in savings and boundless optimism are the ones who tend to be back in the city by month 18. But the financial cost, hard as it is the one you can actually plan for. The mental cost is the part that consistently surprises people. Off-grid life is isolated, and not in the romantic, peaceful solitude way the content suggests. The practical, daily kind of isolated. If you are 2 hours from the nearest city and 45 minutes from the nearest town, you see other people when you make the deliberate choice to go find them. That is a very different dynamic from city life, where human contact is ambient. The coffee shop, the co-workers, the person on the elevator, the background noise of being around people without even choosing it. Research on rural social isolation consistently shows that people underestimate how much they relied on that accidental contact. Remove it, and you have to become very intentional about community, or loneliness arrives by the second winter. The off-grid communities with the best long-term retention are almost always ones with genuine social fabric nearby. Intentional homesteading groups, tight rural towns, family within reasonable distance. The lone wolf fantasy works for a small number of people. For many others, it becomes a problem by the time the first snow falls. Which brings up the question that is worth asking before any of this starts. The biggest misconception about going off the grid has nothing to do with solar panels or composting toilets. It is about what you are actually trying to solve. A lot of people pursue off-grid living because they are burned out, overstimulated, and running away from something they cannot quite name. And going off the grid will remove the commute, the open office floor plan, the notification noise, and the cost of city rent. Those things do go away, but they are replaced by a different set of demands. Physical exhaustion, system failures at inconvenient hours, uncertainty, and problem-solving that has immediate material consequences when it goes wrong. The people who build lasting off-grid lives tend to share one trait. They are running towards something specific. They want to grow food. They want to build things with their hands. They want daily proximity to land and physical work, not as an escape from their problems, but as an expression of who they actually are. The people who struggle tend to discover, somewhere around month 8, that what they actually needed was rest, a job they did not hate, and maybe a shorter commute. Off-grid living is not a treatment for burnout. It is a different set of demands. Some people prefer that set. Many find they would have been better served by a therapist and a 4-day work week. Neither answer is wrong, but knowing which one applies to you before you spend $80,000 is worth the effort. For the people who stay and push through the first 2 years, something shifts. The systems are built. The learning curve flattens. The land starts producing in ways it did not before. The days stop being emergencies and become something closer to routines. A routine very different from a city routine, but a routine nonetheless. Coffee, animals, systems, check. Work. Whatever work means on that particular property. The people who have been doing this for 5 or more years describe something that is hard to explain to someone who has not experienced it. A quality of time that city life rarely offers. Not ease, not leisure. A sense that the work they are doing is directly connected to their own survival, comfort, and food supply, in a way that most jobs, however well paid, rarely feel. It is not for everyone. The numbers are clear enough on that. But for the people it fits, returning to grid life becomes very hard to imagine, not because the off-grid life is without problems, but because the trade now makes sense in a way it did not before they tried it. So that is what actually happens when you go off the grid, not the YouTube version. The version with the $40,000 first year, the water math, and the 3 nights sleeping in your car because you ran out of propane in February. It is possible. People do it, and some of them love it for the rest of their lives. But the gap between the idea and the reality is real, and it is wide, and it is worth understanding clearly before you sell the apartment. If you want to go deeper on any of this, the power systems, the water systems, or the financial planning side, that video is on screen now. See you there.